Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you guys can hear me? Sure?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm Allison. I work at NFP with Alex, and we are on the BI team. Alex is on the analytics team, and our presentation is about PySide6 desktop applications, foundations, form, and function. I guess, Alex, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. My name's Alex. As Allison said, I work in the analytics team. And I come from a background of math and physics, so coding isn't my per se number one forte, but been learning a lot and hope we can share some useful, very nice information that we've learned along the way.
Yeah, for sure. So over this presentation, we'll go through like why build a desktop application, like when you would, what is PyQt and PySide6, features of these frameworks, the model view structure, and then we have a couple of demos to give you guys as well. So that should be it. We'll start off with why you would even need to use a desktop application. Why would you even build one? For us, the number one thing was we needed our end user to be able to customize a lot more than just like giving them a data visualization that you would in Power BI. They needed to be able to do calculations and change some data and do all that kind of stuff. And that's just the easiest we found with a desktop application. As well as like when you create your own desktop application, you have full customability with how it works, how much data you're giving the end user, like what the end user can do, what they can't do. You just have full control over that. You're not relying on a third-party application to limit you or what you can and cannot do because they built it, you didn't. The offline aspect as well. For our analytics team, that was pretty important to them. If they're not, in the office, if they're, flying, traveling, whatever, they need to be able to still run these calculations offline. So that was pretty important. As well as, especially in our business, we're in the PBM industry and pharmaceuticals. There's a ton of logic that is constantly changing. There's constant exceptions to the rules, so that being able to input our own business logic into the desktop application was absolutely crucial. As well as it allows for a bunch of data sources, like different types. We don't just get Excel files, CSV files. We get, you name it, we get it. Excel 97, Excel 86, whatever, like PDFs. We get it all, and the desktop application allows for all of that to be in one area.
A couple of examples that use the desktop applications, and in particular PySide6, when I first learned about them, they quite surprised me because I didn't expect it because they look quite professional. And then I realized that PySide6 had through more discovery that professionals use this a lot. So Dropbox uses PySide6, Anki, you might have used that if you ever tried to learn languages. They have a good library, a flashcard system, Calibri for your ebooks or any of sort of that. GUIs. So there's a lot of nice applications that, or professional applications that are updated today and used today that use PySide6.
Did you want to do this one too, Alex?
Yeah. So we'll sometimes say PyQt or PySide6. They're essentially the same thing. The one difference that separates them is licensing. So PyQt is developed by Riverbank Computing, and PySide6 is made by the Qt company or maintained. PySide6 has a more flexible licensing, so we tend to use PySide6. But with regards to functionality, there is a bit of a there's not really much of a difference. We have never encountered a situation where we would be like, damn, I really want to use PyQt. It's mostly small syntax errors. So the PySide6 and PyQt both come from this C++ framework called Qt. And Qt has this extensive set of features that are quite easy to use. They simplify GUI making a bit through rather than having this model view controller architecture that we will mention later on, but they simplify it into a model view system where you have the data and the actual GUI kind of separated. And there's a kind of a communication that they have built in, a single slot mechanism is what they call it, that allows developers to really handle these events and create responsive applications. They also come innately with very nice UI. It's not a let's say Windows 97, like it doesn't look like that as a default thing. So
Yeah.
that's an overview of that.
So yeah, as he kind of mentioned some of these features, we mentioned the signal slot mechanism. That is in place of your controller. So normally you would have like a model controller view. So with what's nice about PyQt and PySide6 is you don't no longer need that controller aspect. It has all those like functions kind of built into it with the signal slot mechanism. Like for example, if you clicked a button, that button click can trigger a function like a calculation, and you don't need to write that all into a controller. It just does it. It's just part of the Qt framework. Um, I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but like for people that don't know, I didn't know this right away either. But a framework is like a collection of libraries. So PyQt has all the libraries built into it, has all the functions built into it. It's not just like NumPy or just like that's the library. It is like a collection of all that stuff together. But also another nice feature is that it's because of that model view, the scalability of it is really nice. It's smooth to work with. You don't have like, at least for me, you don't have to go, okay, this is the model, this is I need to do in the controller, this is the view. You can just seamlessly go between them, which is really nice. It also has a large library set. There are tons of widgets, tons of buttons, tons of labels. The customizability is huge with PyQt versus like other GUI frameworks like tkinter or maybe Pygame. PyQt is probably has the biggest library sample size for sure.
Yeah. So, oh.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no. So there's a lot of, well, as Allison mentioned, the library is very, very quite expansive. There's a lot of wonderful, like already pre-built things. There is the also like the signal slot connections are also again already integrated and kind of already made for you. Like what you would intuitively want is already there, which is great. So you can just reference them and use them. It makes well, we made some desktop applications before with tkinter as we were learning GUI making, and that was quite the endeavor to try to make let's just say the robust applications that we needed to suit the analyses that we had to do. So this using PySide6 and these and the overall framework makes it very, very nice and easy. It's also cross-platform, which makes it very, very, again, easy to distribute. They have from the most really basic widgets to really advanced widgets. They have integration with SQL as well. They have certain models and items and classes that are functions that are already that have that in mind, allowing you to interact with databases or connect the database and your GUI very, very seamlessly and easily. They also have support for threading. It has its own like thing so that you can have you can control the threads of your application, and they have some very, very nice theming. So together with Python simplicity and the library that or the set of tools that PySide6 comes with, it makes it very, very easy to build such as an application or desktop application that's scalable, robust, and it has a modern look and feel.
I agree. So as we talked about earlier, that this model view architecture, so your model, it's going to handle all your like data interaction. So it manages all those aspects. That's where you're doing like your some of your calculations, like your logic is in there. Whereas in the view is just like that window, that view for the end user. That's where people are putting in their user input. That's where you're putting in like your little widgets and line edits and whatnot. So these are two different parts of your code, and you pretty much want to keep them separate. You don't want to be putting windows in your models and whatnot. Some built-in models. So I have an example here, like QString list is just for lists to view like lists. In the next one I have a bunch more. Oh.
So
yeah, sorry, you can keep going. But there's a bunch more, like your windows, your tables. There's probably like hundreds and hundreds of libraries that you can use to view.
yeah, so within, just as Allison mentioned, there's like a QString list model, which is used to hold and control data for lists that are in the list format. They have a standard item model, which is just for a singular generic hierarchical data. You have the QSQL table model, which is again has already functions that are built that allow you to really easily connect to a SQL database. You can control very easily like what things are allowed to be customized or be changed, or you can just block. They say no one can change this, or no one can interact with the database that isn't commit certain changes. You have views that allow you to, let's say, view that data, right? So then the QList view would correspond to the QString list model. So you can view that list with that model. An inherent advantage of this like model view system or this separation of data management is that, let's say you have a button or a drop down that has Alice, Bob, and Charlie, and you add a piece of data or something in the database changes, and then Dan is now in the list. If you had another drop down or some visual representation of that model, that will seamlessly update without any need for a code, for any like special function that triggers that event. Rather, the information is stored on the model and the view displays it, and you don't have to communicate between different parts of your GUI or code that in. You just connect them to the same model, which is very, very nice. Because in tkinter, we had to do that. We had to make those connections manually, and that was quite taxing. So, yeah,
I mean,
we have. Go ahead, Nessa.
oh, so we discovered when we were in tkinter, I mean, as our desktop application got more and more and more complex, like those little things, it became absolutely unmanageable to a point, and honestly slowed down our code. So when we switched to Qt, PyQt, and PySide6, like that seamless connection was like night and day. It was so nice.
Yeah, it's very I cannot express like how wonderful it was to when we switched over to PySide 6, the just how nice it felt and how nice it was to develop in that framework compared to tkinter.
These are just some examples of models they have. So like we mentioned the list model, we mentioned the standard item model. There's a SQL table model, so you can view your database tables, your list view, table view. You can even do tree views. Tkinter's loves tree views. But there are so many built-in stuff for this. You're not limited at all in what you can put in. unlike some other really basic GUIs, the sky's the limit with these guys, with PyQt.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna demo a very easy GUI, and then Alex is gonna demo his. We basically both made very simple desktop applications with PyQt, and we'll demo them, and then you guys can ask questions. So my demo is about calculating loan amounts. Super simple, super quick, but you start off in your model PY. You're going to import all your libraries. Obviously, if this was a bit more complicated, you would have more than just one import, but here you just have import math, and then you have your class loan model. So in this init, you're defining your loan amount, your annual interest rate, and your loan in years. You're defining your calculations, and then also the calculate monthly payment here. And then in this step, and also I can link this in a GitHub, but there are comments explaining each step as well. But here you're just doing the same thing. This is where all your math is going. You're calculating the fixed monthly payment. So your R is your rate, N is payments, and P is loan amount. This is your equation. And then down here is for this, you can have basically the schedule. So like each payment will be in a table, and then you can export said table. So you'll have like each month your principal, your interest, and then how much remaining is on your loan. And this like I said, very simple GUI, very simple model here. And this is the good part. This is our view. So these are the PySide6 widgets. You have box layout, your queue widget, labels, line edits, your file dialog, message box, buttons, and this is just, if you look at our desktop application, it's huge, it's like a page. And then you have to obviously import your class from the model, import it into your view here. That's what's happening here. And then you have your class loan calculator view. So in this super init, we are building just your basic view. So your window title and how big you want that window to be. You need to create an instance of this loan model, which is what we're doing here. It's first is equals none. And then you're loading in this function here. So the init UI, this is like the bones of the window. So like your first line edit, which a line edit is just like literally a box that the user can just type in. It's not like a combo box, doesn't have drop downs. It's just a straight up line edit. So this is where the user would input like their total loan amount. So like example here is $10,000. Some data validation here is like the placeholder text. This is just like a little grayed out text in the line edit, so that your user, like if you need your user to type in a birthday, you can tell them like this is what it needs to look like, so that they're not just putting in crazy crap in there. So that's what's happening each. So I have a line edit for your loan amount, your rate, and your like how long your term is. And then you have your button. So once this button is clicked, it connects to the on calculate function, which is down here. This is just like the export stuff. But this is where it's taking that user input, that those numbers, and it'll give you like a little pop-up, and it'll say like, congratulations, like this is your monthly payment, in a little pop-up. And this is just some data validation. So we're like, that loan amount needs to be a float, that rate needs to be a float, and the term in years needs to just be a number. So like you can't put in like 2.3 years. And then you're initializing your loan model from your model PY, and you're taking these user inputs. So your loan amount, rate, term, years. And then here, this is creating that table that I was talking about earlier. So that way the user can see like the breakout of their loans. And you can have an export button so that the user could export it as a CSV. It'll open a file dialog, and then the user would be like, save it in your downloads desktop, whatever, and it'll save it. So, and then you have main, which is just running this whole application. So I'll show you guys what it looks like. So this is your GUI. You can make it look a lot prettier than this, but dark mode is as good as it gets from Allison. So, but like, let's say I have a loan amount of 10,000, 1, 2, 3, and I have an interest rate of 6, and I have to pay it off over 10 years. You calculate. So my monthly loan payment would be $111.02. I'm like, cool. And this is the breakout, and you can. I'm using a trackpad. This sucks. Okay. You can edit these columns, which is pretty nice, but it gives you a little breakout of each month, your remaining balance and interest and all that. And you can just export it. So you can be like, export to, I don't know where you want to export it. Let's just put it here. I don't care. And you can save it there. And then you're done. And it tells you, oh, you've saved it here. Cool. And that's just like a little example. Literally took me like 5 minutes to write. I spared you the pain of watching me write it because I can't code in front of other people. So, but that's just a little calculator that, wouldn't. It's really easy. It's not connected to SQL, but you could connect it to a database. We have ours connected to our database. So, and Alex has a little demo that's a little different than mine.
Yeah, so I don't have a fancy calculator, unfortunately. However, I'd like to at least show a bit of the kind of the UI stuff that you can do. I'm not a UI designer, so it's like Allison, dark mode is as most as you're gonna get with some added colors. So over here we have, I guess, all our imports, right? Here I have it in one file. It doesn't have to necessarily be separated, but you can still define everything appropriately within one file. In this init, we define our geometry here of the thing. It's not set. You can rescale it. You can actually say if you want to rescale it or not, give it a title. And the nice thing about the class from which this inherits from QMain window is that it comes with a lot of built-in features like a menu bar, a toolbar, and some other things as well. A docket widget that allows you to just kind of call them. You don't have to make them. So the creation of these widgets become quite simple. So over here we create a menu bar. We have just file. We add a menu file. It's as simple as that. Here we give an action to a certain widget. So we define something called a Q action. Over here, this is just an icon to make it look pretty. And here's the text. And this action is going to be relevant to this window. So if you're on this window, it will make sure that this action will be looked for, right? We can set a shortcut very easily. And then we can connect this action to a function. So when this exit action is triggered, run self.close, which just closes the application. So the widget, of course, doesn't know that this action exists. So you add file menu, add action, exit action. Okay. And it's as simple as that. Here's another one, similar process, help. It just shows some dialogue. And again, the same idea is you can create an action, you can put some text, you can have that action trigger. And when it gets triggered, it just shows about dialogue. There might be a note here is that when you trigger something, like what defines the trigger, a lot of these things are already pre-built in, so you don't have to code in exactly double click or click that part. You don't have to do that. A lot of it is, again, built in. But of course, you can add shortcuts like Control plus Q, etc. So over here, we add a toolbar. This kind of floats around. I'll show you it in a second. And below we have this central widget. So this central widget is kind of like the main bit of the quote unquote Q main window widget. So this central widget will contain your tables, interactabilities, right? Here we have a way to have a form. There's a lot of, again, nice visual things that you can do. And over here, we have a model. So we're going to create a model here in this helper function, just Q standard item model. You can either have it as a class or just as a variable. We input some data into the table. Again, it doesn't have to be defined this way. You can input SQL data, probably better use Q SQL table or some other type of model that's more built for that. But here we have something simple, and that will display the data. Again, some buttons that have some functionalities and styles. So here's how you would add styles. You can see the C++ is appearing here, the framework from which it comes from, right? So here you can add all sorts of nice customizable features, background padding, and so forth. And here are some helper functions that will be easier demonstrated if I show you. So here's the actual thing. Again, not a UI designer, so that's not the point of this. But here's an example of the file menu that we had at the beginning. If I press exit, notice Control plus Q also appears there, and I didn't tell it to appear there. But again, you can control these things. But it's nice that these things appear here, and that would exit the application, right? Here we have a help. This button is meant to show a dialog, and there it appears. Here we can have an example of a form. Here the way the form is set up is that if I type in a name or something of the nature, it will send a trigger to change this bit of text here. We can press greet and it's hello Bob. So again, you can have these things change. You have this toolbar. Here's that toolbar that I was mentioning. This thing can be moved around. The Q main widget just has this as a built-in thing, which is very, very nice. I can even have it like this, just kind of around here if you want. So this is, again, no need to have that, no need to manually code that in compared to tkinter. This is just part of it. Yep. Here's just a random button that says show info. This is a PySide6 demo application. Right. And here's an example of the table that we have here. Here's a table view, has employee information, ID, name, age, occupation. We can, let's say, add a row, and then we can change in the name to Ben. He's, I don't know, having a midlife crisis, maybe 55. And a role, UI designer. There we go. So you can add this and add this information very easily. You can set up ways to save this, or you can even have, if you were interacting with a database, you would probably want to like have this as a confirm. Are you sure of these changes? Sometimes you might have foreign keys appear. You can define these things called delegates so that instead of viewing a foreign key, you would actually view another column that would be attached. Of course, it'd have to be unique, but this allows for people who are not necessarily tech savvy but need to integrate with the database or need to look at data to interact easily. And if we wanted to remove a row, Ben has been removed. He no longer works here. And yeah. So that's an example of just a bit of what you can do with PySide6.
Yeah. We wanted to show you guys a little bit of our application that we built, but IT just recently broke a little bit of it, so we can't. But so we just made some demos for you guys. Any questions? I'll open it up.
Yes, I have questions.
Oh no.
So you're sorry. I'll try to be as nice as possible so you guys can do more future. So this you said for the first application, it would make sense for it to be offline, and you can just calculate stuff online, even when you're offline, which makes sense. Second application seems more like employee information that goes into a master table or something. How does that work offline? How does records that I am updating gonna work with what Allison's gonna update when she's offline?
Sure.
And how do you how do you validate the user who's putting in this information? Because then I can say Allison without it's not an HR record, right? So how are you? What is your other qualification? Since due to sensitivity and stuff like that, you're not probably showing the production UI, but even for your how does it work for your prod?
So for the demo or like our real life?
Real work.
Sure.
So you don't have to show it, just kind of how does it work? How do you keep it?
So I guess with regards to communicating, let's say if you were to work offline, right? One thing that you would need to do is obviously have a local thing stored for you. This can either be in JSON or SQLite or whatever you desire, right? To then access that information. You would have to have a sort of a logging scheme or some type of ledger, right, to see of your changes, right? I think so. That would mathematically that's what would make sense to me. So that way, if someone commits something, however you're offline, right, it's there, but it's not for the rest of the world to see. So then you would need to then, once it reconnects, they'd have to cross-check, right? Perhaps that ledger, right? And then you can go ahead and confirm that this was good, right? You can go quite crazy, at least theoretically, with how many levels you want. I mean, the whole I think crypto and all that jazz is made out of some sort of ledger verification scheme taken to a point. I'm not too knowledgeable about that, but you can certainly have systems in place and logic in place that will accommodate for that at varying levels of complexity. Does that
Right now.
address that? Or...
So in our desktop application as well, like they can't do that much offline. Like we just have it. So if Alex's boss needs to run an RFP or a renewal like right now, like he'll have to do it a bit more manually than otherwise would, but he could. Like if they were like, it's due tomorrow and Ken's in the middle of the forest. He was like, okay, I gotta knock this out real quick. But yeah, so there would have to be some, like Alex said, like some cautions put in place so that like you're not just uploading stuff offline all the time and somebody else is changing stuff and it just turns into a gigantic mess. But for us anyway, it's really, you need to do the calculation today and you can do it offline, but it may be a bit more manual than you'd like. Those numbers also, they might not be saved until you're online somewhere.
Okay. Do you use any kind of AD for user login? Like how do you restrict all these people who are using this? Because I can send my application to somebody else.
Yeah, so for our desktop application that is connected to our SQL, hypothetically you're connected to a SQL server like Microsoft SQL. We have like a service group, or I think that's what you call it. So it's just like a list of people that have access to that, and that people can only access the desktop application, and then they are the only ones that have access to that database.
So you do have rules within your application.
Yeah.
How do you, it's a desktop app. I was going to ask, how do you deploy it? But should you just send it to your list of people?
Pretty much, yeah. It's like, so for us, it's like 3 people. Like it's just our analytics team, just because they're doing all their stuff in an Excel file. Basically, they're pulling data from this file and they're going over here and they're getting some more numbers and they're going over here and they're getting some more numbers. They're manually typing all into an Excel file and then they're like manually doing all those calculations in an Excel file. Then they export this Excel file into a product. Just a mess. So we were like, it's just all in one place and it was just a desktop app. You just run some numbers, export, boom, there's your PowerPoint. Like that's the idea anyway. Just to do some calculations. So that my team isn't having to also do calculations and all that good stuff.
How are you doing? I'm sorry, or do anybody else have questions? Go ahead.
I've just got a general couple. As far as the layout goes, and the more design side, does PySide6 have library, because you were talking about it has libraries, does it have libraries for graphic visuals to represent data? Because the only thing I saw was like a tabular data set. So I was wondering, like, is there further functionality in terms of like visual representations and things like that?
I have never added that to our desktop application. I'm probably. I just, for us, if you need to do like if you need to visualize it in like a line graph or something, that we just go straight to Power BI. Like,
Even
yeah, I'm sure you could add it, honestly.
I just double checked the documentation here, and there is something that's innate with a line graph. So you can do, it's just what is it? What you call it? I had it here. Oh, PyQt graph. It's just PyQt graph. So it turns out that I guess this is another library that one would have to separately install, but there's support for at least through a secondary library. I think the native visual part is through something called QGraphics Scene, and that is, I've heard, pretty robust. But again, I'm not too familiar with that.
And how well does it integrate with other packages outside of the framework that it has? Like
Pretty well.
pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, so we're using all sorts of libraries, you know, like pandas, NumPy, like all that good stuff. Like it's just completely seamlessly integrated. It's
Sure.
fine.
Okay. Cool. Good to know. And then you were talking about licensing too. Is there a community edition or a free edition?
It's free.
It is.
Like the whole framework is free.
Mhm.
Yeah, we would definitely not pay for it, so don't
Sure.
worry.
Sure.
But how it's like maintained, I think, is like through those companies. It's like that's how updated I know, because they just updated our Python, and so PyQt is working on updating all their libraries to work with the new Python 3.13. So
Gotcha.
or 1. Whatever the new version is.
Cool. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So you diving into that. So there is everybody in your. You don't get admin rights to your laptop, or you can't set specific your application to look for specific Python version. Are you just using the person's whoever's laptop has the Python version? You're not doing a check.
So our company is just like you're using this version, and they just delete everything else you have. So we don't really have that issue of, well, Joe's using 3.8, I'm using 3.12. Like our company's like, you're using 3.13 whether you like it or not. And that is why currently some things aren't working that we're having to fix, but it is up to date. So everybody's on the same page.
Everybody's on the same page. It's a really hard situation because apps development doesn't work that straightforward.
I don't work at corporate. So I didn't make that decision.
I think the IT teams are the ones who would set that playing ground, because this is IT place.
I mean, so my company, like, it's just me, Alex, and then I have a couple of other coworkers on my team. But like, we're at the mercy of corporate IT.
Okay.
if they decide what they say goes. You know what I mean? It's a it's a fun issue.
So the backend, oh, sorry, any other questions? The backend, you said SQL. So everybody, I guess, any people who have to have access, or you expand who have to have access, and you give access based on the 80 group,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. There are other ways to do it. So like right now it's for SQLite, which you can use or not, but it's just like a file path. So if you have access to that file path, you have access to the database, and therefore you have access to the executable. But it also connects to Postgres. I assume it's the same kind of setup, but I haven't actually connected it to a Postgres and users. I've only done it at SQL Server.
So your prod is connected to SQL as an on-prem SQL Server?
It could be either. We don't have it on-prem, but
What are you connected to?
so for when I was messing around in our SQL database, I was connecting to it like just to Microsoft. Like I just had to put in my credentials and it was like, okay, you're good to go.
Sorry, is that an on-prem one or?
It's Azure, yeah. Yeah, I would assume on-prem would maybe be easier. I don't know. I barely can connect to Azure, so.
Because, I mean, you mentioned the offline aspect, so.
Yeah, so at that point, you're not really messing with that. But you can do all the calculations, which to them, it's like to analytics, that's what they care about. You know what I mean? Like,
How difficult would it be for you guys if you ever decided to roll it on Azure, do a Azure app service, host it online?
I don't know. I mean, I have no idea.
Oh,
I mean, gonna be honest, like
okay.
we barely can connect. Like I'm struggling to connect it to Postgres and do all that kind of stuff. Like that's like new learning territory for me. Alex probably knows more though.
Well, what was the exact question?
Me?
Yeah. He didn't hear your question.
Oh, sorry. So connecting to Azure, hosting it in Azure service versus doing it as a desktop app. How easy plug and play is it code in your entire app is at the moment?
Okay, I understand. I wouldn't be able to say as to the ease because we would have to actually perform
Yeah, we would
it.
have to do it.
We'd actually have to do that. I don't imagine too much difficulty, but
Because when you showed your code, it seemed like they were modular and the libraries were already built. Like you have set classes somewhere and it's sitting out there. So yeah,
yeah,
there's like a reason why do you guys have it on-prem or on the desktop app versus
So
except for the offline aspect, which you mentioned is
yeah,
stuff that has to happen manually.
I mean to be just quite blunt, like we have to keep all of our stuff like on our local laptop. Like we don't have like that Azure environment that we can use really.
Oh, you don't have an Azure environment? Where do you guys use the Azure SQL?
So I have a empty database sitting in Azure SQL. I no longer have like any permissions to it, and it's just sitting there, and it's in the process of being like deprecated, which is why I'm switching to Postgres, which it's same setup, same script, it's just to Postgres. But yeah, that whole like Azure system, yeah, it's a complicated little business we have right here. Yeah.
It costs money.
I mean, not just Azure. Just finding out about all like GCP or AWS, everything.
But Azure costs money.
Yes.
It can be big money.
I mean, yeah,
All three.
All three do.
our company is like, you can do all this on your little Chromebook. It'll be okay.
So, authentication, user authentication.
Hmm.
You said there's a group. Is
Yeah.
it a Windows 80 group or is it an Azure 80 group? Microsoft Entra.
So I haven't exactly messed around with that much because like I just add the users like just manually. I just type them in, but that's
Do
how
what?
you would do it.
Sorry, add the users to what?
Like for me, I literally just type in like you can type in hard code it into the Python script.
Oh, in the application.
yeah.
Got it.
There,
I-
PySide6 does have some like inherent like network authentication module
Yeah,
or,
it
or
has.
class. So that it is capable. It does recognize this error, or not this error, but this obstacle, right, or this importance. So that's something that could be used more, let's say, perhaps more effectively by us. But um, it
Yeah.
it is there, and it has a whole bunch of classes and
Yeah,
stuff
if
that's
you
kind
had
of
an
pre-built.
environment, you could set it up like that, but we don't. So I can't tell you the exact code to do it.
Do you also internally, I don't know, you said you're one group. I'm guessing there are more corporate groups that possibly use your library. You guys shared with other groups within your entity? Is this non-sensitive code that, are you sharing it outside of your company as well? What is
The logic
open source?
is very sensitive. We have all of our like contracts in JSON files that we're storing in our SQL database. So that's sensitive. We don't go around sharing those JSON files, but like the actual code of our UI and stuff, I'm not really. I mean, anyone can write that stuff, you know.
Within your system, you do share it with others too.
Anyone on my team or Alex's team, but pretty much outside of that, like they don't touch it. Definitely like corporate and we don't.
Is
We
there
always play nice.
sorry, is there a corporate BI and analytics structure? Is that what I'm?
I guess. I mean, so we're NFP VPS, so we're part of NFP, which is a part of Aon. So there's NFP IT, and then there's Aon IT. I don't know how much they're talking, but we pretty much exclusively talk with NFP IT, which is there a BI? I'm sure there is. I've never talked to anybody. They're a BI group.
Just again, going through what things you can share within your company. So
Yeah, we wouldn't share like our rates, our contract stuff. Like we would not share that with like anyone outside of our St. Louis office.
okay.
Unless I got the green light from people higher than me, you know.
And all the code is in GitHub, or what kind of source?
Yeah, it's in our private GitHub, and actually a lot of it right now is just sitting in like SharePoint. So if
Yeah, we're a relatively small team, so it's easy for us to communicate. Admittedly, it is probably not the best practice, right? But um,
Yeah.
If you're
we do
small,
have GitHub, yeah.
it's a limited constraint. I mean, limited resource constraint that's not within your. It's not in your hands. So I mean,
yeah, I was like all those fancy gadgets, we're not allowed them, so we do what we can.
Anybody else too?
Anyone else just want to rip on it?
I am sorry. Maybe I should just have
I'm
a
just
few more
kidding.
questions after the meeting is over. Okay. I'll reserve some for later. I'll let you come back from Peru with without thinking about this too much, Alex.
All the time. Last time I presented, I think there was like 45 minutes of just questions I was bombarded with. So this is
Hey, just so
Well,
you know,
nice.
I mean, it's just questions I have in general about how it works.
Yeah.
Nothing-
No, it's okay.
Not critical or anything. Sorry.
no, it's cool. I'm open to all questions. I do not care. my company makes certain decisions, not my problem.
Not to go on a tangent, but I did look a bit into like the design or the graphics stuff a bit more. There seems to be quite a nice set of graphics that are available. Even you can even control if they're movable, selectable, and all sorts of things, which seems pretty nice. But just to give a bit more, I guess, information with regards to that. The documentation of PySide6 is quite robust. I think I should mention that we we reference that quite frequently if we ever need to, and it is very, very easy to read. It's not hard compared to other documentations that I've read. There's also, I think, a pretty widespread tutorials with regards to that that are very, very succinct, right, concise, that get to the point, which is very nice.
It's great. Oh, I was going to ask one more question. In terms of turning this into an actual application that is, I presume you all turn it into .exe
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
And so what's the process behind that for you all?
So we haven't yet made our desktop application exe just because it's we're still kind of like working on it, especially right now. But in the process to that would just be you just use the Python library PyInstaller
Okay.
and just make it into an exe like that.
Okay.
That is where I learned about like the connections to SQL because I'm new at this, so I was like, I can connect no problem. Then I was like, wait, how do I share it with Ken, who is not? Because I hard coded my authentication go in there, and I was like, well, Ken isn't Allison Harris, so like, how's he going to use it? And that's where I looked up like, oh, it would be a group and service group or Active Directory, whatever, and that's how you would do that. Yeah, it's just we just make it an exe and then we drop it into the file share, or I share it somehow. So
Okay.
I'm sure there are better ways to do that. But I'm not sure of where.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like it works, obviously, but
Works for us.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the other question too is how do you, what's your methodology for connecting to an external source like that, like a user group or what have you? Do you just build something that asks for credentials and then
Yeah.
puts it in?
Or so I was looking into that a bit more. You can just put that all in PyQt code. Like they can make it dynamic. I wish I could explain that a bit further, but basically you would set up like an environment in which that you would have like a config JSON file that's dynamic, and that user, so when it starts up the exe, that config would start up. It would read that config. They would have all that information in there. So you don't have to hard code it. But that's how I would go about it. I probably will have to go about it here in a few weeks. So
Yeah.
It's good to know.
I think
JSON for the win. When we discovered JSON files, we were like, oh man, it's quite the game changer.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was a great time. Looking a bit into the network authentication, it seems that it is, the more I read about it, the more it like reference in the documentation, like all these authentication systems that it has, I think, guides to or reference. I mean, the nice thing, at least in confidence, I can say that PySide6 definitely has it figured out, because Dropbox has an authentication system, and Dropbox, I think, solely uses PySide6 or use the desktop application that is, right, uses is written in PySide6, right?
Yeah, and if you needed like, obviously for us it's just a small group, but if you needed more people than just one team, you can obviously set up a login prompt, and do it that way, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure your DBA will have a lot to say on that.
Sure. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to.
No, just keep asking them. Go for it.
That's all for today. Like I said, I'll keep my time ready for next time too.
Thank you. Did you guys do like announcements after?
Sorry, what?
Do you guys do like announcements after the meeting or?
We could just say we're done, but before you leave,